better understanding of new directions that this fashion future will hold for us. I'm going to do introductions, and I'm not going to do them briefly because they deserve a proper introduction, especially for our students. Priya Khanna, the first ever editor of Vogue India, brings more than a dozen years of publishing and editing experience to lead Vogue India's talented team. With an aim to attract millions of loyal readers, Priya is responsible for putting together and inspiring the creative team dedicated to introducing Indian women to the world's fashion Bible. Priya and her team focus on combining the best of Indian and international fashion, creating trends for fashionistas to follow, and providing the latest news, reviews, and stories in a format that is both stylish and accessible. Priya, of course, has extensive experience as an editor. She's worked with After Hours. She's edited the supplement for Times of India and Time Style, a watch and jewelry magazine. And we are very much looking forward to your views today, Priya, on the future of Indian fashion. Sabyasachi Mukherjee. He started his label with a workforce of 3. And you can see how happy I am to see him here. We've known him since before he started his label. Today, he retails out of 4 flagship stores across the country. Sabyasachi's design philosophy is very simple. Personalized imperfection of the human hand. He believes that clothes should be an extension of one's intellect. Deserts, gypsies, antique textiles, and cultural traditions of his hometown, Kolkata, have been a lifelong inspiration for him. His NIFT graduating collection titled The Kashgar Collection was visionary. And I have to add here that we as an institute are extremely proud of him and the success that he has attained over the last 21 years. Thank you both so much for being with us here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sabya and Priya, we have with us a large number of students and professionals listening to this, and we have received many questions from our students. This is for the students. Sabyasachi and Priya Khanna will take 3 questions, and the shortlisted questions will get a special prize, which Priya will announce by and by. I will also be requesting both of you to say a few words, especially to our graduating batch, to encourage them in these difficult times. So students, stay with us. I'm going to start with my first question to Sabya. Sabya, Indian fashion has evolved to many contemporary forms while drawing inspiration from the rich dress and textile tradition that has existed in this country since the earliest times. You articulate the message of creating classic and beautiful clothes by reviving, sustaining, and contemporizing the traditional crafts of India. And I'm very fond of telling people that thanks to Sabya, I finally came back in fashion because I've been wearing my Banarsis for the last 40 years. And when you wore Banarsis in fashion, back in fashion, I came back in fashion. Thank God for that. So Sabyasachi, how would you define Indian fashion, especially with reference to your individual brand?
Thank you, Vandana. Hi, Priya.
Hi, Sabya.
And Priya, I welcome you to my institute because I am from NIFT. And in fact, a lot of you don't know that Vandana Bhandari was my mentor for my design collection. She passed me, and that's why India has a label. So thank you. And, I've always believed that India has something very unique to give the whole world. Because if you look at luxury cannot be made in a day, cannot be created in a day. It has to be made organically. And what can be more potent than Indian luxury that has existed for thousands of years? It has survived so much. It has gone through Mughal invasion. It has gone through so much of, it has gone through so many evolutions, so much form. But yet, when you look at many of India's textiles, when you look at saris, governments have come and gone. There have been pandemics. There have been economic resistances, ups and downs, famines. But a lot of our iconic textiles have survived through centuries. And, when I try to build a brand in India, I keep saying to people that Don't destroy to build, rebuild to build. Because I think that there is so much that we already have within our country. We need to become ferrymen between the past and the present. As designers, sometimes we need to understand that there is already so much in the world. I have never thought that innovation for the sake of innovation really leads to anything. As a brand, I don't even call our brand a design brand. I call our brand a restoration brand. What we do is we take things from the past and bring it to the future, because a lot of the younger generation will only read about these kind of textiles and clothing only on the internet or go to museums. And we are going through a very big crisis right now, the pandemic, because of which a lot of art and craft in India is going to be very, very endangered. I don't even know if it lasts for a very long time, how much of it will actually survive. Because, like I said, that craft cannot skip a generation. It has to be intact every generation for it to go forward. So, every one of you who want to take Indian fashion forward, I think it's important to go back to the purest movement, because it is something that is not only sustainable, it is also going to be very desirable.
Thank you, Sabya. And I'm going to ask Priya to take the next question. Priya, in a recent article, you talked about your role as a wife and mother, and how this time in isolation has given you that rare chance to reflect and re-examine our relationships with everything: work, money, people, family, among other things. Vogue itself internationally is going through a change. And yesterday, one of the top person that Condé Nast has resigned. And I'm just thinking, what is going on in the world? And do you think this time is going to change a woman's outlook to fashion? And how are you, as an editor of Vogue India, going to present this to the world?
Thanks, Vandana, and thank you everybody for joining us today. One of the things I like most about my jobs is being able to interact with young designers and students like yourself. I'm going to take that question and answer it in two parts, Vandana. I mean, at a personal level, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone, um, it has been very, very intense. It has been life altering, and I don't think this applies to me. I think the beauty of this entire experience is that we've all globally experienced the same thing, and that's never happened before. But there is truly something that's impacted each and every one of us. Um, so personally, of course, it just makes you reevaluate everything about your life. It makes you reevaluate your priorities. In a way, it's been a blessing because it's been time to quieten your mind, quieten your pace, quieten your thoughts. And I do feel somewhere that we've all been responsible for what's happened to us. You know, we were putting too much pressure on the earth, too much pressure on the natural resources. And we were also leading a life of excess. It was too utopian, it was too hedonistic. We weren't consuming mindfully, we weren't living in moderation. Whether it was travel or shopping or celebration, it was all fairly mindless. So I think this has been such a large reminder that we all need to slow down the pace of our lives at one end, and at the other end completely learn to value what is most important to us. And I feel like in some measure from all the conversations I've had with everybody, everybody seems to have come up with a new sense of purpose, a newfound sense of what really, really matters to you at a time like this. And as the custodian of a brand like Vogue India, it's been no different. You know, I always say this, and in fact, it's a conversation Sabya and I've had many times, that fashion is the most beautiful form of expression. Fashion holds a mirror to everything that's happening around you. Music does, art does, and fashion surely does. It's 3D, it's visual, it's direct. And I feel every time a crisis takes place, the world pivots. And as dedicated insiders of the fashion industry, as ambassadors of all that's best of India and Indian fashion, we've pivoted too. We've pivoted not just now, we've pivoted every single time something happened to us. So when I'm not sure if you guys remember, but when the heinous Nirbhaya crime took place, we pivoted and we launched Vogue Empower. We recently launched a diversity and inclusivity campaign. In fact, as Vogue, and it's interesting you bring that up, Vandana, that as a magazine, we had a massive brainstorm with all the editors world over earlier this year, where we said that the world is moving in a very different direction. There's so much talk about inclusivity, diversity, mindfulness, sustainability, and these are not just trending words. These are totem poles on which we need to rest our opinions and our content. So how do we really integrate that into the magazine? We did a paradigm shift from January, and it's interesting that the pandemic happened just after that. So I think whether it is trying to understand the relationship the consumer has with fashion now, how much that has changed, and what do storytellers like Sabya want to tell? What are the stories they want to tell now after the pandemic? I think we've been very sensitive and mindful of that, and we've incorporated that into our content. It could be something as simple as talking about seasonless clothes. It could be something as simple as talking about you don't need to go out and shop everything. Shop less, but shop better, shop smarter. It could be something as simple as launching a campaign to support young homegrown labels, which we have done on Vogue.in. We've been very, very mindful of the time that we're living in, and we've pivoted and incorporated all of these conversations into our content.
Wonderful. Priya, would you like to just talk a little bit about Indian fashion? I know you have some things you want to discuss with Sabyasachi, but could you talk a little bit more about Indian fashion?
First and foremost, there is no such thing as Indian fashion. For me personally, there's good fashion and bad fashion. There are good clothes and bad clothes. And I almost feel we put ourselves in a minority when we put the spotlight on Indian fashion as opposed to international fashion. We boast of the richest textiles, craftsmanship, embroidery in the world. We are truly superior. So for me, what Indian fashion is all about, at one end, it is about carrying on the legacy, being patrons and being purveyors of the richest textiles, embroidery, craftsmanship, the craft clusters, making sure that we're custodians of the sari, making sure that we're custodians of bridal wear, making sure we understand the beautiful, complicated, and delicious relationship an Indian woman has with her clothes, which is so unique from any other international country and any other international market. And at the other hand, our job also is to support and provide a platform to young homegrown talent who may be making contemporary clothing, who could be the next, what would I say, the next Giorgio Armani to come out of India. Making sure that we're really continuing to put the spotlight on the old and new, on the legacy and the new age, on innovation and inspiration. And for me, covering this in a country like India, which is not really one country. I've always said this, that India is many countries into one. To try and understand and map the spending habits, women's relationship with their bodies, their festivities, their clothes, their style, and then to sort of cover all of that into a 200-page magazine month after month has truly been the most exciting thing I've done in a long time.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So I'm going to move to my questions because I have a lot of questions to ask both these lovely people here. Vandana, I'm actually going to start with you. And I'd like to ask you, given what's happened and it's inevitable, I'm sure you are thinking of the plan ahead. What are your thoughts on distant learning, e-learning? A lot of the institutes world over, and not just fashion, every big institute and university has a very aggressive distant learning course and syllabus. What are your thoughts on the same for fashion in India?
So let me try and answer that. I think the need for learning at one's own pace and space has already led to online education across sectors. It's been, we've been a little slower in the creative sectors, because I think people have always felt that if you have to teach music, if you have to teach dance, you require specific instruction, you require a one-to-one interaction, you require infrastructure. But frankly, online education is here to stay. And the sooner all of us get on the bandwagon, the better it is for us.
Yeah.
when COVID came, it was like we had to do this suddenly. Overnight, we were pushed into this need, and what we could not achieve in years, we actually did at a very rapid rate. And not just we as NIFT did, schools did it, other institutions did it. Today, I was reading, one of the IITs has successfully done online exams for the first time, and people have been able to achieve that. But I think this was a short term response to a much deeper need. To be really successful, we'll have to look at making online education where our educational content is authored in a way that becomes more dynamic, it becomes more interactive, it becomes more engaging. And this would really address many, many different needs. One of the big needs it would address is that in the creative industries, many people don't want to come to teaching. Especially these days, people want to go out and practice. So this would address needs such as faculty shortage and training. It would address needs such as evolving content. It would look at interdisciplinary needs. And it would help us to really stay current with the fast pace of changes in the industry. So I think this is the time when we have to move to online education. We don't.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that would open up so many more opportunities for young students to have access to a good fashion education from, a legacy brand like NIFT, Sabya, over to you. My question is, can you imagine yourself being a student in a time like this? Your final year graduating student. I'm sure they're saddled and riddled with a whole bunch of apprehensions about the retail atmosphere and whether this is going to be the right time for them to launch their business. And I'm sure they're just waiting to hear what advice you would have to give them at a time like this.
I don't want to mince any words. So what I want to tell you is this is absolutely the wrong time to launch your label, because the virus is not going to go anywhere. It's here to stay, at least for the next 6 or 8 months. I don't know if we have a vaccine in the near future, the near horizon. We are at a time when we have to choose between life and livelihood, and it's a very difficult situation, especially for a country like India where there's extreme poverty. You know, it is not possible for us to kind of adhere to a fixed costs endlessly. Every company is going to buckle. In the next 1 or 2 months, you start reading in newspapers all across the country, worldwide, that big companies are going to be brought down to their knees and things are going to fall like nine pins. One also needs to understand something, that there is human life at stake right now, and I don't know if many people will have room or desire for vanity, because people are going to worry first about food on the table. They're going to worry about a roof on their heads. Then they're probably going to worry about their savings, their children's education. Fashion will come a distant sixth or seventh, because fashion right now is not an essential commodity. What one needs to focus on is clothing. But if you have to launch, maybe this is not the right time, because I would suggest that this is a good time for you to intern or to study further or to learn from global experiences about what's happening. Because please understand that you're coming into business at a time when the world is at unrest. And when you come to business at a time when the world is at unrest, you have greater opportunities to break in, because everybody, if you come with a newer idea or a newer ideology, people will be just willing to lap you up. This is the time to create a new superstar in fashion, because we are going to look for a new voice. So the timing is correct. Don't dive into it right now. Hold your horses, study, educate yourself, breathe, understand the mistakes that we as bigger designers have made so that you don't make them again, and start afresh with a newer ideology. And please remember that right now people are not going to look at fashion as disposable pieces of vanity. They are going to look at it as investment. So create clothes that are, like Priya said, that are timeless. Create clothes that people can spend their hard-earned money and wear over and over and over again. If you talk about sustainability, the big problem with sustainability is human greed. If you can create clothing that is going to give you multiple, that's going to tick multiple boxes of usage, and clothing that can stay in your wardrobe for over and over again, then you've had a winner. So I think it's important to focus on quality and values, and it's a great time to start a business once we find the vaccine.
I think that's a really important and honest piece of advice. You haven't sugarcoated it. And, I think now's the time to first plan, plot, figure out a path ahead and not jump into anything too hastily. Sabir, have you noticed that, we've been a part of the Vogue India Fashion Fund, which was, where we provided patronage and mentorship and prizes to young design talent. And there was such amazing design talent coming out in the country as far as ready to wear garments, couture, lehengas, all of that, ready wear is concerned. Why is it that we don't see a lot of talent coming out and moving towards the accessory stroke leatherware segment? Is there any reason? Why do you feel that's so?
You see, Priya, for many businesses, if you look at leather good industries all over the world, especially handbags, and when we talk about women's handbag and the it handbag, for a lot of people, it's a banner to enter in a very exclusive club.
Yeah.
So what happens is, fortunately or unfortunately, leather goods become important when a brand is super successful, and then it becomes an offshoot for people to use it as an entry level ticket to get into the brand. A lot of people buy leather goods from big brands not because of functional usage, but because it gives them some sort of a position in society.
Yeah.
So, which is so I have seen that for many people, getting into leather goods first is difficult because it occupies a very small part of your body, and so it is very difficult to a create immediate recognition with the leather goods product. Because I'll give you an example. One of the reasons I got into jewelry is because I just realized that when a girl was taking her wedding picture, it was still here, and all you saw was jewelry and none of my clothes.
Right.
So you know what when you put something on the human body, like clothing probably will occupy about 60-70% of human body, and accessories would probably occupy about 10 to 15%. So it is just easier to advertise clothing on a human body than it is to advertise product on somebody's shoulder. And it's easier for you to break in because it's clothing is much more newsworthy for media than accessories, because they are not going to talk about a Bollywood actress carrying a particular bag, but they're going to talk about what kind of clothing she was wearing first.
Right.
So in a country like India, where you need where you need popular culture to be able to make yourself heard, clothing just becomes an easier breakthrough point.
Right.
But having said that, I also want to say that we don't really have big super brands in India in the accessory department. So it's
Yeah.
also a virgin market. So if you have a plan, and if you can create a brand out of leather goods, I think it's very desirable for the market.
Absolutely. I keep thinking, why don't we have our own equivalent of Hermes or LV? And we have the best couture in this country. What is stopping the leatherware designers from seizing their moment? Sabia, we've spoken so much about the Make in India movement and how we both feel that the post-pandemic world will see us return to, you know, to this new wave of fashion nationalism. Literally, we're going to be overcome with it. When you talk about that, how much of that is about consumers endorsing Indian wear, or is it about consumers supporting homegrown labels? In your mind?
You know, uh, if you look at what's happening politically in the country with the border, and with the collapse of the American dream, there is a space for a new Indian dream to arise. I think in India, for a long time, I'm talking about the last 7 and 8 years, Indians want India to succeed. Earlier, it wasn't the case. There was a time when we were either very proud to be Indian, or we were slightly apologetic about being Indian. But right now, that general sense of pride in the country has become stronger and stronger.
Yes.
So, under these circumstances, everybody will want Indian designers within the country to succeed. Whether you're doing Western clothing, whether you're doing Indian clothing, it doesn't matter. But having said that, you also need to remember what the consumer wants. The consumer wants an identity which is very Indian. They want things that speak about a cultural nationalism. So whether you're doing Indian clothes or Western clothes, if your brand supports that ideology of cultural nationalism, so if you're making a jacket, are you going to use a jacket out of a plaid, or are you going to make a jacket out of a brocade or a pochampalli fabric? Is something that you need to think about. But Indians will want to start wearing their Indianness on their sleeve.
Yes.
In terms of beauty, there is going to be a very strong emergence of Indian beauty. The kajal will come back, the bindi will come back for women, jewelry is going to come back. In terms of Western clothing, also there is going to be a big push for Western clothing, which has a very strong Indian soul. So whatever you do, whether your clothing choice is Indian or it's Western, make sure the soul of India is not hidden, but people can wear it on their sleeve.
Actually, that brings me to my next question, Sabya. For young designers, again, I'm talking about a lot of the people who could be, a lot of the young students who will launch their brands, and very successful ones at that, I hope. In trying to tell a Make in India story, what should they be highlighting? And I don't think anybody can answer this question better than you, because you truly have been the best storyteller of India to come out of India in the longest time. And I say that in all honesty. So I think any words of wisdom from you on how you did it will be priceless for them.
So I'm going to tell you all a story, guys. We have a poet in Bengal. We had a poet in Bengal, Michael Madhusudan Datta, who wanted to always write poetry in English, till somebody told him that you are going to be a failed poet if you do not learn to write poetry in your own mother tongue. And he came back to Bengal. He learned poetry. He learned the Bengali language when he was, I think, I don't know, probably in his 30s. And he wrote one of the most beautiful poem called Bongo Bhasha, which literally translated means the Bengali language. And in that, he had said, Kelinu Shoibale Gulia Komolo Kanun, which translates as that I played with Kichar and I ignored the lotus garden. I wanted to tell every one of you designers that your biggest story is your story. It's your authenticity. It's who inspired you, who were your friends, where were you born, what was the local ecosystem, which club you went to play, what movies you saw, how did your grandmother and your grandparents raise you, which are the textiles that inspired you. This is the time for authenticity, and the biggest influencer is your past, where you come from. So when you try to talk about a story, make sure that the story talks about authenticity, because gone are the days where we could build a brand surely out of elitism. Today, you have to only build a brand out of authenticity.
Very true.
And when you build a brand out of authenticity, when you have a story to tell, let me tell you something. I'm a middle class boy. I went to NIFT. My parents did not give me any money. I have a 278 crore empire that I built out of 12,000 rupees, which was funded by my sister and my father. I had no godfathers. I didn't know anybody. There was no Vogue at a time when I started. Calcutta did not have a fashion column, leave alone a fashion newspaper or a fashion magazine. But I had conviction and I did it. And I was a complete outsider who made it in the world of fashion. And all the top elite of the country wore me because they found pride in my authenticity. So never be ashamed to tell your story, however humble it is, because it is your authenticity that is going to make you a super brand in the country. That's all I have to say.
Sabya, that just gave me goosebumps, because I could not have said it better, and I completely agree with every word you said. I want to talk a little bit about this whole movement to digital and to e-retail over brick and mortar. Do you think the younger designers, those that are starting their career, and I keep coming back to this because I know that's the whole lot that is today listening to us, they want to start off their business. Do you think they're better off, being retailed from a brick and mortar store? Should they consider strong digital options? Should they launch it from their own Instagram accounts? what would be the best way for them to move forward with retailing in an environment like this?
I would just like to say to all young designers starting your first collection, work with a multi-designer store, or work with a e-tailer who has a multi-designer format, because they have the power to be able to incubate you. The beauty of being in a multi-designer store is that if you have good clothes and if they believe in you and if they give you good positioning, a woman coming into the store thinking that they're going to buy me ends up seeing your clothes and ends up buying you. So you can basically feed off the ecosystem that bigger designers create. So it's
Right.
a smarter way to enter the business. But however, I would like to tell you that many people are talking about the after effects of the pandemic. One thing that we all need to understand, every single one of us in this country and in this world, that we are human beings. And as human beings, we have certain tendencies of being human beings. We have certain instincts which are our own. I I think that you know we've had an overdose of digital in our lives,
Yeah.
because we are all sitting in our rooms leading sad lives where our entire wonderland or our entire playground is a small little smartphone.
Yeah.
Once the pandemic gets over, we
We
will
want to get out.
strive to celebrate. People will go out in hordes. Once the vaccine comes out, people will hug each other, kiss each other. They will stand on the street. There will be carnivals. They will celebrate, because we cannot digitize our lives, because if we digitize our lives too much, we end up becoming robots. We also need to have a life that is beyond a smartphone, and that's going to happen to all of us. There's no going back from there.
Right. Uh, and I want to ask that same question to you, Vandana. In your curriculum, does digital retail feature as an important subject matter? Do you teach them the tenets of digital retailing and all of that?
Yes, of course. We have a mixture of online and offline. And to add to what Sabya said,
Mhm.
today we are really talking about a convergent transformation.
Yeah.
Education and companies are going to build new capabilities beyond the online and offline. There'll be combination of the digital and the physical, because we've been moving so long only in the digital direction as innovation. I think
Right.
there's going to be a transformation, there's going to be a convergence, and we
Right.
have to really reinvent our digital, our product and our services to come to new formats. And
Right.
at the institute, the type of curriculum we have is, as soon as new things start to happen in the market, we start to integrate them first through our evening programs, because they are easier to immediately implement, and then maybe through an elective, and then slowly into the main curriculum. So both online and offline retail are very much part of our curriculum.
Right.
I want to add one thing here, and this is very relevant for the industry. What happens is that when people employ a NIFT student, they think here is this NIFT product and he or she should know everything. Now, we run 10 different disciplines in the institute, and every discipline specializes in one thing or the other. So, the retail is taught to management students, and they are the ones who have a certain expertise in that. But if a design student were to go into it, he may have only done one 3 credit course in retail, and he may not have the expertise. And then the industry would say, oh, but you don't know retail, and you've come to us. So it's very important for industry as employers also to understand the skill set the students are bringing with them when they come to the industry.
Important. But Sabia, don't you feel, and again, I ask you this because you are amongst the few designers who've managed to make his left brain do the same amount of work that his right brain does. You've managed commerce with creativity so beautifully and so successfully. How important is it for young students and young designers to have a strong business understanding? Do you feel it's almost going to be a need of the hour for them to finish a fashion design course and then top it up with an MBA?
If only an MBA and a design degree could make a designer, we would have designers a dime a dozen all over the world. I I just want to say something here, that a friend of my father's had told me something, when a friend of mine and me were setting a business together. This was much before Sabyasachi, and he saw us quarreling over something. He said that the front wheel and the back wheel of a car are equally important, but when the back wheel decides to become the front wheel, the car collapses.
That's true.
When you go into films, for instance, when you go into photography, for instance, there is a word called first AD, which is the first assistant director.
Right.
In many cases, the first AD runs the show because he has a lot of skill sets, probably which the director or the photographer might not have. Similarly, you all have to understand something, that everybody who comes out of a fashion school does not have to become a fashion designer. They have to contribute to a fashion ecosystem,
Industry.
because there are so many things that you have to do. You have to talk to income tax. You have to talk to Deepika Padukone. You have to talk to a Priya Khanna. You have to speak to advertising.
People
you,
are dying to do that, Sabya.
you have to do TV shows. You have to talk to HR. You have to speak to dissenting labor. You have to talk about infrastructure. You have to find out why toilets are not clean. You have to also find out why fabrics didn't come on time, why an order didn't get delivered, why a VIP customer is upset, why somebody has written something about you on social media. The roles are immense and diverse. When you're running a fashion brand, let me tell you something, design skills and management skills are only probably 15% of the job. The rest of the job is something that you either have an acumen or you learn in the
The
journey.
job.
But let me tell you something, if only everybody who made good clothes became designers, then we would have wonderful clothes all over the ecosystem in fashion. But you have to understand something, a brand is so much more than that. You have to be able to you have to be somebody who can spin multiple plates at the same time. And if you have an appetite for risk taking, you have an appetite for uh, really, really long nights, if you have an appetite for stress, then become a designer. It's not as easy as you think it is.
Sabia, let me talk a little bit about the glamour side of design, and I think that's because you've just spoken about the hard work and it not being as, it is not as glamorous as it looks. And I get this a lot. I think a couple of people saw a movie about the editor of a fashion magazine and assumed that all we do is go from fashion show to fashion show and beautiful clothes. And it's anything but that. It's a lot of rigor. It's a lot of methodical planning. It's work. It's hard work. Um, but Sabya, tell me, do you feel the glamour one associates with fashion and the drama, the aspiration, why girls fall in love with clothes and why young boys and girls want to become designers? Do you think that is in fear of obsolescence because of the pandemic? Do you think it's all going to become too practical? Do you feel like people will just want what they need? Because somewhere I feel it's that little greed that makes fashion what fashion is. It's when you already have one beautiful shirt, but when you see all of a sudden Sabyasachi drops a collection and you see something and you're like, oh my God, I want to save money, or I want to steal money, I want to do something to buy this. That drama, that need, that I want it. Is that going to be an obsolescence? Is there a fear, a threat of extinction of that kind of emotions?
No, Priya, never. We will probably have to do a lot of rationalizing. We'll have to do rationalizing in terms of sustainable practices, in terms of price correction, in terms of demand and supply. But the entire premise of fashion has always been fantasy and escape, because as human beings we require that, which is one of the reason
Absolutely.
because which is one of the reason why post-war musicals, big exuberant clothing like Dior's new look became so important. I think fashion will come back in celebration of exuberance even bigger than before, because every time somebody has gone through a low phase, they want to be in a mood to celebrate, because that is just the way humans are configured. But
Absolutely.
having said that, there will also be a lot of mindfulness, because we cannot celebrate and we cannot be exuberant at the cost of the planet and at the cost of social good.
Right.
So while mindfulness is going to become very, very important as a barometer, people within that mindfulness will learn to celebrate again.
I really hope so. I think that's why you fell in love with fashion. I think that's why I fell in love with fashion. And I feel that's one of the reasons almost every other woman I know does fall in love with fashion. And I would be very sad if that drama of fashion died down. But from glamour and drama,
Priya,
yes,
Priya, I just wanted to say it's going to be a temporary phenomenon because
yeah,
human is very short-lived, unfortunately.
yeah,
But having said that, I think that you see what fashion also is in many ways is creative expression of the self.
right.
You cannot homogenize people because the more you start homogenizing people, the more people will want self-expression.
To be different, yeah.
No, absolutely. But tell me, Sabya, like, let's talk a little bit about sustainability since everybody is putting such a thrust on it, and it's about time, right? It's about time, and I feel as in India we've had a strong culture of hand-me-downs. We've had a strong culture of reuse. We share clothing, and in that sense, I feel we've been quite ahead of the curve. The problem is, as a designer, sustaining the price points. People almost always assume that sustainable clothing is more expensive. Any advice you can give the younger designers out there who want to launch a sustainable brand and want to combat this aspect of it?
You know, there's only one human virtue that goes against sustainability, which is greed.
Yes.
You take greed out of the equation, everything in the world will become sustainable. Greed for more money, greed for power has made every single business practice in the world, most business practices in the world, non-sustainable. But let me also tell you something. I see India far more evolved and sophisticated in terms of sustainability than the
I
West.
agree.
Yeah.
Because while the West is an economy that has always uh, worked on pure consumption, India's consumption has always worked on savings. And we as a country, you know, we are just wired in a way where we look at consumption as investment. I do not see India doing as much of mindless consumption as the West does. Even if that consumption has happened, it has happened only in the last 7 or 8 or 10 years. I think there is a curve. For the longest time, India was not exposed to a bigger international market.
Right.
Everybody goes through that curve where they will, out of curiosity, consume. But Indians come back to sustainable consumption very quickly.
Right.
But because I think we have too much of guilt in our DNA to start doing mindless consumption, and thank God for that. And like I said, that if you let's talk about my favorite topic right now, India versus China. China can never become India because India has far greater sustainable practices. India has far more integrity in terms of its business practices, in terms of the way we look at life. And so when you look at a product that's created out of China and when you look at a product that's created out of India, even in a sustainable barometer, Indian sustainability is always higher. You
Right.
know, we have been taught like that. If people ask you about sustainability,
Mm.
not many people even know what sustainability really means.
No, no,
For a
they
lot
don't. Yeah.
for a lot of people, it's just a fashionable hashtag.
Absolutely.
For a lot of people, it's greenwashing when you use sustainability as advertising to further your business because you understand that your consumer does not understand what is sustainability.
Exactly.
Sustainability is about doing business the right way. And people cannot teach you right and wrong because right and wrong ethics is something that is ingrained well in your system. When you're doing something wrong, you might be doing it, but you still know that you're doing it wrong. So I keep telling people that the sustainability barometer is very ingrained within the Indian system. Learn to respect it. Sustainability is about asking hard questions along the way you grow your business. I want to tell you something that my company in the next few days will start doing its pay cut. I've never done a pay cut in 20 years. I have 2,700 employees working in my company. Throughout March, April, May, and June, we have paid them full salaries. even though only 5 or 6% of the people could work from home and 96% just stayed at home. That barometer in me that told me that, these people, most of them who have worked with me for 20 years, I need to at least tide them over the lockdown and then release them, and not leave them high and dry at a time when they can't find any other job, is a sustainable practice.
Right.
Sustainability is not just about buying sustainable fabrics. It is not just about making sustainable clothing by doing sustainable practices. Sustainability is financial sustainability, cultural sustainability, ecological sustainability all put together. It's a good old-fashioned way of doing business where you don't harm people while you aspire to become bigger and better.
Right.
And I
Right.
think if I can just add here, a lot of designers and people working in the industry are really looking to the West for definitions of sustainability. And that is where the dichotomy is coming. So I think it's really important for us to define our own sustainability, because we come from such a strong and rich wealth of sustainable practices.
Right.
Families where people had only two saris until one tore, they would not buy another one. That's the kind of sustainability we've seen in our culture, and I think that has to penetrate deep down into the understanding of designers.
Vandana, I want to add to that. You've touched a very raw nerve in my system. I get extremely annoyed when Western ideas of sustainability are pushed into a country that already understands sustainability and it's a practice in our existing life.
Absolutely.
Please do not get hogwashed by media information about sustainability, because your country understands sustainability like the West. The West can take a leaf or two about understanding sustainable living and practices from a country like India. We are a country that is going to lead. I was just telling a friend of mine that while the American dream collapses, it's time for us to redefine an Indian dream, because the Indian dream is the real dream that everybody will aspire for. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
every single designer who's watching this and listening to this, it is your responsibility to teach the West about what sustainability, good fashion, and real luxury is all about. It becomes, you have to fly that flag high, because I really believe, and I'm not saying this as a political manifesto, I really believe that luxury and sustainability starts in India. Nobody understands it better than us.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. But Vandana, that what you were just discussing about with Sabya leads me to asking you one question before I ask Sabya my last question. And that's, again, because we instituted the Fashion Fund, we were in touch with a whole legion, and we did this for about 5 years. And we were in touch with a whole legion of young designers, fresh out of college, beautiful collections. And then you see them and they have a great debut at a fashion show. And they become the talk of the town. They become the toast of the town. And everybody says, oh, have you seen this? And have you seen? Come 2 seasons later, a lot of them have vanished, right? I have my own understanding of why this happens. What I really want to know as an educator is, why do you think this happens?
So, we often see this happening, and I think it's true of many professions. And Sabya answered this when he was talking about what it needs to be an entrepreneur. But I'll add a little bit to this. The way we really work and evaluate students at NIFT, generally, the students who do well in the institute, they do well in the industry also, because we have a broad parameters of evaluating them. We do a continuous evaluation. But they could do better in jobs. And I'll give you an example. When I was a young student, I can't draw to save my life. I still can't draw. I couldn't draw as a student. And I had a faculty from New York, and I went to, and I said, I'm, literally in tears. And I said, I'm never going to make anything of myself because I can't draw. And she said that, don't worry about it. You can do so many other things. I said, but it always puts me in the middle of the class because I lose marks over there. To be brilliant in college, you need to be good at everything academically. Okay. But the students who do well commercially are, one is, this diligent, hardworking students who submits everything on time, who's an all-rounder. He will do well in a job type of a situation. I think they rarely, in my view, some of them may, but rarely do they do well commercially, but they will make excellent employees. The second are students who do well, and there are many types of students. I'm just talking about two types of students who really dance to their own music, and they do not adhere to the structure of formal education, which is required for courses where continuous evaluations are done. So these type of students will flourish when they can work in a less structured environment, such as, if they can get up at 4 in the morning and they can be doing their graphics. Yes, Sabya is like, I am that person. Also, students may be in different streams which don't challenge or excite them. For instance, we are trying to tell a photographer that you have to do drawing, or we are telling a person who wants to sew clothes to say you have to be good at graphics, and he doesn't want to do that. He just wants to sew good clothes.
Yeah.
So in college, they don't get excited with their work. And I remember one of our students, many years ago, he's a brilliant designer, doing so well in the industry. And I had to go away for training abroad. And when I came back, he said, "Ma'am, I was so happy when you were not here." So I said, "What kind of statement is that to tell your faculty?" So he said, "I didn't have to do any pattern making and construction for 6 months. I was so happy, ma'am." So I think commercial success, especially for their own labels, as Sabya mentioned, requires so many multiple skills. You have to have the ability to work really hard. You have to be able to take risks. You have to understand markets. You have to understand consumers. You have to understand economics. You have to understand finance. And frankly, no one person really has all of that. So either he has a great team and does it, or he needs to have all those qualities. So I think that's where they fade out. And also, many of them are idealists. They do not
Right.
want to, and Sabya is going to nod his head. He always says, "You're such an idealist. You have to ignore and you have to go on with work." But when you're an idealist, you say, "I'm not going to do this because I don't agree with this." And when you're working commercially, sometimes you have to
Yes.
work for the market. So
Absolutely, that was very valid.
I want to butt in here. I want to say something to the students. Very important thing. You have to find a fine balance between idealism and commerce. Let
Yes.
me tell you something, because I don't know if a lot of my classmates are watching this. I was not one of the best students. I was probably better than the worst, but I had a plan. I knew what I wanted to do with my life and I stuck to it. I put my head down and I worked very hard to get where I am today. And I keep telling a lot of people, like, I'll give an example of somebody like Madonna, one of my, and Priya, today I will tell you why I'm fond of Madonna. She, like a lot of us will agree that she's at best a very mediocre musician.
Right.
But look at the entire package that she created.
Right.
You know, there are many more singers who are far more talented than her, but she was the reigning superstar for the longest time because she had it in her to create a music brand. And sometimes when you don't have all of that, it's absolutely fine to be able to have a small label. And it is also fine to be able to work under somebody else. Let me tell you something. Gone are the days where your barometer of success depended on how much money you made. Your barometer of success is completely dependent on how much influence you have on a microcosm or a larger section of society that talks to you.
Right.
And you need to make peace with uh, that kind of influence. Like everybody cannot be a Shah Rukh Khan, but that does not mean that they're not respected actors. So you have to understand that if you cannot play to the gallery and if you want to stay small, do not have the dichotomy inside you, the dichotomic dream that you want to be idealistic and at the same time you want to be commercially successful. It's like wanting to have your cake and eat it too. That doesn't work. You need to make a choice.
Absolutely. My last question to you, Sabya, really is that if you had to start out your label today, in this day and age, 2020, what would you have done differently?
Good question. Priya, I would have focused on wedding clothes because right now, within the non-essential group that we have been shoved to, wedding is still the most essential commodity because you might not want to buy another pair of jeans or another top, but another handbag. But if there is a wedding happening in your family, you will consume. But I
Right.
also do wedding clothes which are timeless, which give people an opportunity to reuse them over and over again. Or I would create a brand by repurposing old clothes, because there is a need for upcycled clothing. There is a need for, I don't know, what do we call it in NIFT, deconstructed clothing, because I think one could work with products that don't go into landfill and create beautiful products that people can celebrate and not feel guilty about consumption.
I couldn't agree more.
Absolutely.
Vandana, actually over to you. Do you want to read out the questions? I'm actually very, very excited.
Sabia, you had a couple of questions you wanted to
Yes.
ask Priya. So
Yes.
Oh no, are you putting me in the spotlight now, Sabia?
Yes,
Priya,
absolutely.
first you. You know, Priya, when we were in NIFT and when we were young students, one of the first magazines that we would see was Vogue and the cover of Vogue. For a young Indian designer,
Right.
what you put on the cover of a magazine shapes their aspiration and their dreams. So when
Right.
we are talking about Make in India, when we are talking about India Proud, how are you, as the first editor of Vogue India, with such huge influence, with a magazine that has shaped the dreams of generations of fashion designers from all across the world and fashion students from all across the world, will use that very, very important platform as an instrument of change in the country?
Well, I have to tell you, Sabia, that I actually fell in love with fashion because of Vogue when I was 13. You know, I saw a dress made by an American designer called Bill Blass in the pages of Vogue, and it was an American Vogue. And there was another designer called Perry Ellis. And I remember seeing their clothes and saying, I cannot imagine such beautiful clothes exist in this world. And they actually made me just feel happy. It was like therapy at the age of 13. And that's when I decided that I was a lifelong reader of Vogue. And honestly, when I took on Vogue, I was 33. I was probably, and I definitely was the youngest editor of Vogue in the world. And I had a very different idea of what I wanted my Vogue cover to be. I was very, very clear, Sabia. I wanted the cover to showcase the best of India. I mean, we pride ourselves in being a magazine that brings the best of world to India and brings the best of India to the world. And I think I have been a very mindful custodian of that. And literally all credit goes to my team who helped me achieve this dream every day. I think the cover you choose is very, very important. When they say don't judge a book by its cover, I don't think it applies to fashion magazines. I think in magazines, you definitely judge a book by the cover. I have all this amazing content inside, but if I can't seduce you to come and pick up the magazine off a newsstand, then I've lost you. So, what I communicate with you as a consumer, the first stop, our blind date starts with the cover. You only get to know me better once you've picked up the magazine and then you go through the pages. And I think it took us a while to realize this, but I would say honestly, in the past 5 years, we have been super, super mindful of the kind of people we put on our cover. I know we receive a fair amount of criticism on featuring Bollywood stars, but here is a fact, and I think you will understand this more than anyone. I have two covers. I have a Bollywood star and I have a non Bollywood star. The Bollywood cover will sell out 4x the non Bollywood.
Wow.
I need more people. It's a very simple business decision at one level. I need more people to pick up my magazine so I can tell more people about the insanely amazing things that are coming out of this country. I can introduce them to the most amazing women and the extraordinary things that they are doing in this country. But at another level, we've also realized that our responsibility is not just about the content inside. Who we put on the cover matters. Earlier this year, and we began our year with you, Sabya, we had Katy Perry. When we launched our sustainability issue, um, we found in Katy a very, very strong, champion of sustainability. And we dressed her in recycled Sabyasachi, head to toe. And I can't tell you how beautiful that cover looked and how viral it went. We then went on to feature Winnie Harlow for our March cover. And Winnie is the first, as everybody knows, the first supermodel with vitiligo. Again, we wanted to make a statement. And I think with our June issue, which was Takashi Murakami, we went with a non-fashion cover. It was not the right time for us to talk about selling clothes. It was the right time for us to feel like we're all part of a larger problem and that we're all in this together. And we wanted hope. For me, that artwork that was put together by Takashi Murakami represented hope. And that's really what that issue was all about. And actually, as you see in the months to come, if you've seen the latest cover with Anushka Sharma, yes, she's a film star, but she's so much more than that. If you follow her Instagram, if you see her social media posts, she's a sun chaser. She's true to who she is. She's taken on some very, very bold decisions with her career. She's a producer. She's an entrepreneur. She's an actress. She's the kind of woman we want all women to be. She strums to her own tune. She's that maverick who leads by example. So I wanted her on the cover. And as you will see, as you go along, most of our covers will reflect the times we are living in and what we really want to convey. Sorry, if that answers your question.
No, thank you. Lovely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I have another question for you.
Oh, no.
Sorry, last one. Everybody is talking about what is going to be the future of fashion in the world.
Yeah.
And I can tell you with no hesitation that the future of fashion in the world is going to be India.
I agree with you, Sabya. 100%.
And I don't say this, I've never been a politically correct person. I am controversy's child because I've always spoken my mind. Sometimes I put my foot in my mouth, but my intent is always right. And I am telling you with this, not only just with true intent, but just by understanding the universe and how the universe is going to play out. I think people all over the world are just going to be fed up of factory-made clothing that gets churned out over and over and over and over again by the billions. China is great for doing that. But let me tell you something. India will produce less. But India will produce so much better, so much more of authenticity, so much of craft. And I hope somebody from the government of India is listening to this conversation. Somebody from the Ministry of Textiles is listening to the conversation, that our soft skills in textiles are the pillars of the country. They are our greatest ambassadors. Our art, our craft, our music, our literature, our food, our fashion are what makes India not only unique, but it also makes it extremely formidable and extremely strong. And I would like to appeal to you, Priya Khanna, editor of Vogue India, that when we are talking about fashion nationalism in this country, we know that the backbone of fashion in this country is our craft and our textiles. What can Vogue do in partnership either with the government or with designers or with corporates to champion the cause of Indian textiles and Indian heritage? Because if this craft is preserved, I am telling you, the Paris Fashion Weeks that we used to see at one point of time in the next 15 years will start converging in India. Because this is the true capital of luxury.
Sabya, you know what? I agree with every single thing you say. And
we will be asked me this on our NIFT website. So it will get to the ministry.
Sabya, you should be asking me this question 1 month down the line, because I'm just about to announce a very, very important fashion initiative, which is going to do exactly that. And in fact, right after this webinar, I was going to call you and chew your brains to say you have to be a part of it. But now I have it on record that you are going to be a part of it. Absolutely. But coming back to what you said, there are obvious ways of doing it and there are subliminal ways of doing this. And as you've said, people don't take messages when they're thrust down their throat. People take messages when you make it palatable to them in a language they understand. If I tell Vandana, you have to wear Banarasi every day. You have to wear Banarasi. She's not going to. But if I do it subliminally by putting the most beautiful woman in India in a Banarasi sari, or I tell her that the most chic thing to do right now, and Vogue tells you it's Banarasi, she's more likely to. And that's exactly what we've been doing since day one. Whether it is stories on Khadi, we were the first to support it. Whether it is stories, whether it's launching projects like Project Renaissance, which you again were a part of, where we took the most beautiful Indian weaves and we gave it to the international designers, asked them to make something new with it. Whether it was the Sari project, where we put the spotlight on the sari, or it was the traveling jacket where we got 5 designers from 5 subcontinent countries to put together one traveling jacket. We've been doing this, whether it is the Vogue wedding show. I mean, it is the greatest playground for the most beautiful and most incredible Indian embroidery and skill. We've been doing it. We've been front and center. Just because I don't make a big cover line out of it on my cover saying, Jai Hind and we support craft, people assume we're not doing it. But I have been doing this, and we're a proud bunch of Indian girls. This team is led by women. We produce a magazine for women, and we're all women. So we react and we don't take our responsibilities lightly. We've been at the forefront of this. So in fact, just recently, our MD, Alex Kuruvilla, announced a very, very interesting project called Behind the Mask, where he had leading designers, putting their craftsmanship and going back to their roots and working with their own clusters to come up with these masks for coronavirus. Or it is this fashion initiative that we will be launching in September. Or it's the Vogue India Fashion Fund. We've been doing this in ways direct and indirect. And this is my commitment to you, Sabya, and to everybody listening here, that this is something we will continue doing as long as Vogue India exists.
That is wonderful news.
Vandana, my question to you, last question.
Okay.
I have been a part of NIFT, and at least at a time when I was studying in NIFT, a lot of our syllabus was structured from what the international format of education in fashion was. But with changing times, as we see a growing need for a cultural nationalism in fashion in this country, are you going to start tweaking your courses so that your students don't only land up in export houses or only aim to do runway shows outside the country, but can also serve the growing need for domestic voices in fashion in this country? Are you going to start tweaking your syllabus so that your students learn to understand the domestic market better?
I think you're going to be happy to know, Sabya, we already do a lot of that. You're right. When we started our curriculum, it focused on training professionals to service the apparel export industry from India. But that was the need in the 80s. As privatization, globalization started to happen in the 90s and the world started to open up and education in this sector matured. Remember, we didn't have a fashion education before that. The lack of intrinsic Indian knowledge was seen in the curriculum. And slowly we started to include subjects related to Indian dress, to traditional textiles, to art appreciation, to surface embellishment. And let me tell you, I myself run a evening program which is called Indian Ethnic Wear. And of course, this is a great time, I think, to run full-fledged programs on Indian fashion. Another very good thing that we've done in the past couple of years is, in August 2015, at the first Handloom Day, the Honorable Prime Minister, he urged in his inaugural speech for the Handloom Day, he said that there should be a greater link between handloom and fashion. And we worked on this for some time. And today, every single student in every semester gets an input into craft and engages with grassroots level India. So I think this has been a natural evolution for fashion education in India. There's been an increased concentration of craft education in the mainstream curriculum, but we can never do enough. There is so much diversity in India in terms of silhouettes, fabrics, textiles. I think there is still a lot more that we can do.
Absolutely.
We are moving in that direction.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm going to very quickly, read out some questions from the students. I think a lot of what they have asked has been answered. You'll also be happy to know that a lot of questions that came from the students were on what you've actually talked. So I think they're very current. They are very engaged with what is going on. They've talked about sustainability. They've talked about how craft and textiles are going to be preserved in the future. How is luxury going to survive? How is it going to change? And of course, everybody wanted to know how they can come and work for the two of you. So I've totally removed those questions and I'm going to send you their names later on. So I'm going to take the first question from Zahra Insha Ehsan. She's a fashion communication student from semester 4, NIFT Jodhpur. And she wants to ask both of you, and one of you can answer, how can the designers of today's generation follow sustainability for the future? And I know Sabya has given a really good definition. Maybe Priya, you want to just add a little bit to that?
I think, you know what, I think we've spoken a lot about it and Sabya has said it so and articulated it so beautifully. I think sustainability is two things. It means honesty, transparency, and being ethical in your business practices. And I feel it is need over greed. My bigger problem I face with a lot of designers is that they produce in excess. We produce so much, there's so much excess. I think we need to measure what is greed and what is need. That's one. And I think don't try and do it all. You can't end to end try and be a sustainable label from the second you hit the ground running. So don't even try, as idealistic as you are. Start with one step. Make a laundry list. And there are websites that tell you, that give you a laundry list of all that's sustainable and is considered sustainable when launching a design business in India. Create a checklist and do what you can. Anything you do will be a step better than what you don't do. So I don't think it's about doing too much, but I think it's about being practical. It's about being mindful. Yeah. It's about being honest. And like Sabya said, above all, it is about being ethical.
Correct.
I have something to say here. I just want to add here. You see, it is very difficult for a business, which is a large size business, or a business that has not been sustainable, to suddenly start becoming sustainable, because a lot of systems, processes, costs go haywire. But if you are starting a business from scratch, you can try to be 100% sustainable by starting in the beginning, because every time you have a choice of becoming unsustainable and big, it is your moral compass that should say, okay, fine, I'll wait it out. I will create a sustainable brand. I will build it slowly and the universe will come to me. If you have that faith in yourself, you can actually build a sustainable brand and also become the pride of the nation. So if you're starting in the beginning, it's so much more easier to be sustainable, because you can just be so much more mindful of everything.
Yeah.
So that was Zahra Ehsan. I want to make sure we get all the questions. Sabya, this one is obviously for you. Though Priya, I think you can as well.
No, I'll let Sabya do the talking. Very happy.
Avani Sharma from the Fashion and Lifestyle Accessory Design Department from semester 4 from our Gandhinagar campus. How do you see wedding attire and weddings change with reference to the pandemic that we have had? She's obviously following you on Instagram.
I think people are just going to become conscious about weddings. Sometimes not because they want to, but they will be forced to because of peer pressure. People are going to get embarrassed and awkward about conspicuous consumption. But let me tell you something about the big fat Indian wedding. Do you know the amount of jobs that it creates? Tent wala, halwa wala, shehnai wala, fool wala, people who come and do your chandan, your tika, people who are florists, people who do your hair and makeup, photographers, set designers, the hotel, travel, hospitality, it goes on and on. So I want to say something. This is the time when a country needs jobs. Please spend all your money and do great weddings. It doesn't matter if your wedding is obnoxious. It doesn't matter if your wedding is culturally beautiful. But as long as your wedding is putting food on somebody else's table, I'm just very happy. Just bring on the celebration.
Thank you, Sabya. I'm going to get the last question in. This is from Vidisha Agarwal from the Fashion Design Department. She's also from semester 4 from our NIFT Bangalore campus. And she's really talking about what we are starting to talk of as cultural appropriation. And she says nowadays a lot of traditional techniques, designs, and motives are being used in very contemporary forms. How does this affect the original tradition and craft? And what should we keep in mind while taking a contemporary approach on traditional means so that it doesn't lose its gist and value?
It's a very difficult question to answer. I'll tell you what we do as a brand. We don't tamper with tradition. We just present it to a newer generation for whom it's a new thing because they've never seen it before. I always tell people who are going to master karigars and people that what is one of the biggest takeaways for people who are craftsmen. It's not money, it's pride. Because they have been doing this for years and years and years and years. Please don't come with your limited education and unlimited arrogance and try to change that over and over again. Because no amount of money that you will give them will be able to satiate or compensate them if you strip their pride down. Learn to celebrate a pride of a continued cultural heritage that has gone on forever. And while some of you choose to become innovators or disruptors, I think there's a lot of dignity in just being a restoration artist and carrying somebody else's voice forward to a new market. Please be mindful about the fact that while change is important, it is also very important to keep heritage alive. If you look at a city like Paris, the old and the new coexist together and coexists with pride. Always remember that while there is a space for something new, the old needs to be celebrated also.
Priya, do you want to add something to that?
Priya, you're on mute.
Sorry. I thought these were really, really good questions. And honestly, it's not much, but I think it would be of value for the students. I'd love to gift all the 3 questions a year-long subscription to Vogue India. So if you could send us their contact details, and we will happily send across a subscription to them.
So, did we get shut off? Are we alive? Are we live?
I'm sorry. I think I lost.
Yeah, I think we got shut off. So I'm just going to say quickly that today we have a really strong sense of pride in one's roots, and yet we are very modern and progressive. And I would just like to thank Sabyasachi, and here he is, with this tradition that we have, our new aesthetics, talented and very loved designers like Sabyasachi, passionate crusaders of Indian fashion like Priya Khanna, and of course, education from some of the best institutes like NIFT to support the Indian story. I'm sure we are all going to be able to look behind these extraordinary times. And thank you once again, Sabyasachi and Priya, for joining us and sharing all your thoughts with us.
I would just like to say something on behalf of all the students in NIFT. I would like to thank Priya Khanna. She has an extremely busy schedule. I got her in. No, Priya, this is my college, so you have to understand. I'm an ex-student. So a warm welcome to you, and thank you for gracing this.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All the best to everybody. Thank you.
And Priya, we are going to take you up on your offer of interacting with the students at some other time also.
Anytime. They can write to me. Thank you.
Fix that deal before you came online.
Thank you. So everyone from NIFT, don't stop dreaming. The COVID will go away. Bye-bye.
Thank you.